YouTube's turning into cable TV.
Yeah, worse, man. Even worse because because they spank you while they're feeding you the garbage. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Divulgence. Today, I welcome a very special guest. He is the operations manager for architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. He also is the host of the podcast called 9/11 Freefall. He has been an outspoken advocate for 9/11 and the investigation into 9/11 for well over a decade. And he actually has a 9/11 truth focused graphic novel coming out called Born on 9/11. And I'll give him some time to talk about that because I was looking at it earlier and it looks really cool. So, everyone, I'm very happy to have Andy Steele, everyone. Hey, Andy, how are you, my friend?
Hey, Jordan, thank you so much for having me on and representing the organization that so many people have put a lot of time and effort into. And it's a very important cause.
Absolutely, my friend. Thanks for coming. And that's exactly why I wanted to bring you on. I wanted to shine the light onto you guys. So before we do that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, about your new book, and then we can get into architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. How does that sound?
Yeah, absolutely. For myself, I'm just a guy who's trying to do his best to get justice for the family members, for the people who died on September 11th on that day. I remember where I was on that day. I was actually a college kid, and me and my roommate, we were debating about who was going to stay home because the tile guy was coming over and he was going to fix some tiles that had fallen off in the shower. And I was about to turn the TV off, and my roommate says, "Wait a second." And I look and I see there's a big hole in the World Trade Center. And I actually watched World Trade Center 7 fall on that day. And my roommate had stepped out of the room for a minute, came back in, and he asked me, "What just happened?" And I said, "They brought down the building to control the fire or something." And wasn't even thinking very logically that day, because there's no way you can bring down a building in just a day, especially with a supposed terrorist attack taking place next door. And I put it out of my mind, though, because of all the stuff that was happening, the excitement, and we were just attacked and we were getting ready for a response. And it took years for me to come across a video of, actually it was Stephen Jones talking about World Trade Center 7. And it kind of rang a little bell in my head. I said, I remember watching that fall. And then it just hit me. There's no way that fire could have done this to a steel frame high rise. And if your audience is not familiar with World Trade Center 7, that is the exact place to start. Look it up on YouTube. And I always say, don't look for any videos with any commentary, even ours. Just find a very quick video. It should take only about 7 seconds to watch this building come down. That's the time it took. It went down at 7 seconds, and it comes down straight down, symmetrical, basically into its own footprint. 2.5 seconds of that fall time is in free fall acceleration. That is impossible. Fire has never done that before to a steel frame high rise before that day or after that day. And then once you see that for yourself, then you start asking questions, looking into the Twin Towers, and some of the evidence we'll talk about today will show you that we've been lied to about why these buildings came down, that there were pre-placed explosives in them. So I got involved over the years, did a lot of different stuff for AE 9/11 Truth, different projects, got hired as the operations manager. I started the podcast to promote AE 9/11 Truth, and here I am today talking to you.
Awesome, man. That's so cool. And again, props to you and props to your whole crew, because this is the kind of work that needs to be done. Myself, I started a podcast and I do whatever I can to help different groups aside. And, I still try to think of different ways that I can help aside from just trying to educate people. So props to you, props to your crew, and thank you. And thanks to your crew, because if it wasn't for people like you inspiring people like me, I mean, we'd be, I don't even know where we'd be. So I just want to take the time to say that. So
well, let me just interject to say, people like you inspire me. I mean, I started off with a MySpace page. There wasn't even any Facebook
nice.
back then. Show you how old I'm getting here. But I started off with a MySpace page, and that can lead to a whole lot of stuff. And honestly, if it wasn't for all the other people doing the same work, doing what they can, using the resources that are becoming increasingly available to us, some avenues are being shut down. Some of the The platforms that we used to use have become more heavily censored, but people are finding new platforms, finding different ways to get the information out. And honestly, you guys inspire us to keep going and knowing that you guys are carrying this torch with us. So thank you for doing what you do.
Well, hey man, that's awesome to hear, because I believe that we need to power each other. So that's awesome. So I power you, you power me, and we stay in the game together. So, and we fight the good fight.
Exactly. So let's, if you don't mind, let's talk about AE 9/11 Truth, why we exist, sure. what we've been championing. So for, I believe it's 13 years now. It's been a long time. This organization has existed, and what we represent is over 3,500 architects and engineers who have put their name to a petition calling for a new investigation into the destruction of the three towers that fell on September 11th. A lot of times people's eyes get bigger when I say the three towers, because we're all familiar with the North Tower and the South Tower. We watched the buildings come down on that day. We saw the clips of them rerun over and over again in the months and years that followed, and we see it every year on the anniversary. So, and we were told an explanation for why these towers came down. So a lot of people think they know why they just completely collapsed. And I'm going to put that collapsed word into air quotes for your audience. We'll get back to that in just a moment. But what people don't know about is what I talked about in the beginning. This third building, 5:20 in the afternoon, World Trade Center 7, 47-story steel frame high rise, suffered minor damage on the corner of the building when the North Tower fell. Even NIST, and NIST is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, that was the government agency that was tasked with investigating why all three of these buildings came down. It took them a long time to get their reports out too. But even NIST admits that this damage on the corner of the building played very little role in bringing this building down. What they say happened, and again, I'm going to implore your audience to go look that up on YouTube, see it for yourself, because it helps to have a visual aid. But what NIST came up with, after several years of study and admitting that they're having trouble getting a lock on why World Trade Center 7 fell, is that they say that these beams that were framing into a girder and in the corner of the building, the opposite of corner of the building for where there was any damage, that they got so hot that these beams thermally expanded and pushed this girder off of its seat. And then the building, or the girder, fell onto the floor below. And this caused a chain reaction of events within the building that caused the interior to fall first, followed by the exterior. And that's why it appears to come down as one unit and a controlled demolition style. Now, we got some problems with this story, as you're going to see. First of all, you can't have the interior of the building fall and with the exterior still standing. When you actually watch this building come down, we don't have any significant warpage on the outside. We don't see any deformations. We don't see anything. What we see is the building come down as one unit. So this explanation for how they try to dismiss the controlled demolition evidence is ridiculous on its face. But there's also other issues with the explanation in terms of the beams pushing the girder off of its seat. One of them is that they left out important structural features of this building's design that when you actually add them, so when NIST is doing its analysis, essentially what they did is they left out important parts of the building that were present. They were present in the structure in order to make their analysis happen. And I'm going to read off a couple of them here. One of them is that they omitted the presence of the stiffener plates and the shear studs. And this would have countered the thermal expansion, but also they left out the shear studs that allowed them to pretend that the beams were moving independently of the floor slab above as well. They got measurements wrong. So when you properly add in these structural features into the analysis, which they refused to do. We're taking this to court right now. We did a request for correction originally. Of course, they dismissed it. But when you add it in, it makes it completely impossible. But also, too, for this thermal expansion hypothesis to have any kind of weight, you need raging fires, right? Because the beams can't get hot and expand unless you have fires that are really hot. The problem is about an hour before the building came down, photographic evidence shows that the fires were out in the area where the collapse supposedly initiated. So we've got a problem here. How do you have thermal expansion of beams if the fires are out. So this is yet another reason why we need a new investigation into this building's destruction, because the explanation that NIST gave us is absolutely impossible unless you are using pre-placed explosives. And in fact, the University of Alaska Fairbanks just did a study a couple of years ago on this issue, and their conclusion was that NIST's explanation just wasn't feasible, that you would have had to remove the core columns at the same time and make the building come down. It was the only way they could mimic what actually happened in real life. Interestingly enough, computer models, because that's what we're talking about, the University of Alaska Fairbanks, NIST did a computer model of World Trade Center 7, and they only took it up to the point of collapse initiation. Now, in the computer model, if you watch it carefully, you're going to see that the computer model betrays what actually happened in real life. So the computer model is good if you're trying to present a fiction to people, or if you're trying to come up with some kind of analysis, but it's got to show what we actually saw. And in the computer model, it begins to crinkle on itself like a soda can, and they stop the model right there. So they only get up to the point of collapse initiation, whereas in real life, of course, it came straight down. So even their own models betray real life. And when you ask them for the input data of their computer models on World Trade Center 7, they say they cannot release it. You know why? Because it'll jeopardize public safety if they do. It's a ridiculous explanation. It's obfuscation and lies, essentially. So again, we submitted a request for correction, which is the proper thing that you do in matters like this. They've dismissed it, and we're taking them to court. And that's in the case of World Trade Center 7. Regarding the Twin Towers, like I said, most people think that they've gotten a good explanation for why these buildings came down. They'll say, hey, airplanes ran into it. Of course, they didn't run into World Trade Center 7, but they'll say airplanes ran into these buildings. Of course, they're going to come down. Well, no, not exactly. First of all, the fireball that shoots out of the side of the buildings that you see, I mean, it's very impressive, but it also means a lot of the fuel is being spent in those fireballs. And of course, you've heard the meme that jet fuel can't melt steel, and it's been kind of made a joke out of, but it doesn't stop it from being true. Exactly. All right. So what NIST wants to assert is, this is based on a theory put out by Professor Zdeněk Bezant of Northwestern University. He actually came up with this theory within a couple of days of September 11th, remarkably fast, is that when the airplanes went into the buildings, you got to imagine it now in three sections. You got the top block above, you got the airplane impact area, and then you got the larger lower section underneath. You want to say that when this top block went, it acted as the pile driver, driving the entire building down to the ground. Well, there's a problem with this in that if you actually watch the videos, first of all, this top block disappears in the first 4 seconds as it's coming down. So there's nothing left to do the work of driving the building all the way to the ground. But also, too, this was studied by a guy named Tony Zambodi and a Professor Graham McQueen, and they analyzed videos of the North Tower coming down, and they found that there was no deceleration of this top block as it hit the lower block. Now, imagine that you're hitting a nail with a hammer, all right? As you hit that nail, what's going to happen to the hammer? It's going to slow down. All right. This is intuitive. This is just a consequence of living in the real world, knowing these particular facts of life. Okay. Anytime something hits something below it, it's going to meet resistance. It's going to slow down. So ask yourself, how does the top block crush the lower, larger block without slowing down? It can't unless you have something removing the structure underneath. And that is what we have in this particular case. We also have a problem in that on the floor, I believe it's on the North Tower. Let me look up the exact floor number here. But the airplane wing only touched I believe it's the 94th floor. Hold on one second. Make sure we get this right. Oh, 98th floor. In the North Tower, NIST wants to say that the collapse begins on the 98th floor. But when the airplane goes into it, only the tip of the wing touches that floor. Now, NIST's whole analysis for why these top blocks went depends on the fireproofing being knocked off of the structure inside by these airplane impacts. They admit that the beams could not have sagged and pulled inward unless this fireproofing went. But they also say that the collapse initiated on this 98th floor, but only the tip of the wing touched that floor. So the fireproofing couldn't have been knocked off on that floor. There's an instant problem with this analysis here. It's a reason to go back to the drawing board. Of course, they don't, because they want everyone to rely on this analysis. Not to mention that we have visible explosions going off below the area where the collapse is happening. So you have the building collapsing up here, but we can see squibs, puffs of dust shooting out far below it. You can actually watch it when you slow down the video. Squibs shooting out just beneath the collapse line as well. We have explosions being reported by at least 118 first responders. And the guy who did this, again, Dr. Graham McQueen, professor, he was very conservative when he did this analysis. He went through the oral histories of the first responders, and he looked for specific words. So if somebody said boom, something that might be kind of vague, he didn't include it. But if they clearly said explosion, that they heard an explosion, he counted it. And he came up with at least 118 eyewitness accounts, which were not taken into account by the 9/11 Commission or by NIST, which is who we focus on more because they focused on the destruction of the towers. So we have some major problems going on here with the official story, not just with the physics, because, if there were explosives involved here, which is what we say is the case, you would think there would be some evidence of it, right? Well, in fact, we do have evidence of that. Dust was studied by an independent team of scientists led by Dr. Niels Harrit at the University of Copenhagen. And what they find are tiny iron microspheres. It was so prevalent throughout the World Trade Center dust that actually other studies that had nothing to do with looking into evidence of controlled demolition used these iron microspheres to identify World Trade Center dust and differentiate it from what they call background dust, or dust that did not come from the World Trade Center. Right. So what these iron microspheres are, they're the byproduct of a thermitic reaction. So imagine that you have thousands of structural steel cutter charges going off. They're going to cause the steel to liquefy as it's cutting through them. And then the surface tension is going to cause the falling metal or steel to create droplets like rain falling from the sky. So that's what we see in a thermitic reaction. We also find these tiny red gray chips all throughout the dust. Now, there was a doctor or a scientist rather who did ignition tests on these red gray chips, because people on the other side like to say that, oh, that's just primer paint, right? Well, what he did is he ignited primer paint and these red gray chips, and you can see a side-by-side comparison. When primer paint is ignited, it turns black and it crumples up. And when these red gray chips, however, are ignited, they basically have an ignition and they create these iron microspheres I was just talking about. You can see that in the side-by-side comparison. So it's not primer paint, it's evidence of a very highly concentrated form of thermite, what we call nanothermite. And in fact, the patent for structural steel cutter charges exists. And what it would leave behind is the molten iron, which in fact is what we find at ground zero, tons of that. We have melted steel. So the evidence is overwhelming.
I was just going to say that you got the firefighters and the first responders and everyone who's just trying to help breathing that shit in too, man. And that's
a very important point. I'm glad you bring that up, because we're 20 years after the event and people move on to other issues and they'll say that was 20 years ago. I mean, there's people now who I think pretty much a year from now are going to be able to legally drink if they were born the same year as September 11th, right? But there's so many people who got sick as a result of the buildings coming down, all of that dust. And for them, 9/11 is continuing to happen. So this issue is just as relevant today as it was 20 years ago, because it's still killing people. Because if it had just been airplanes going into buildings, the people who were on those floors would have been killed, but the people in and around New York City and the first responders would not be suffering the illnesses they are now. So this is why we have to keep on pushing this and talking about this issue, because it's still affecting people.
Yeah, absolutely. Before even stepping into doing the research and everything, it's safe to say that if it was just 2 airplanes or whatever that hit those buildings, the amount of damage and the amount of casualties, just to keep things simple, would be essentially, I think, almost minuscule in comparison to what the footprint that was left. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah, the bottom line is these buildings should not have come down. There is no precedent before September 11th for steel frame high rises to come crashing down strictly due to fire, which is the cause, according to NIST, as to why these buildings came down. And then we have it happening 3 times in one day. Interestingly enough, in the case of World Trade Center 7, we have an unprecedented event, a steel frame building coming down in the manner of a controlled demolition. And even though it had never happened before, we have predictions being issued by CNN earlier in the morning, and then BBC famously 20 minutes before it actually did come down. And they weren't predicting that it would come down. They were already reporting that it had come down.
That's right.
In the case of BBC, the reporter Jane Stanley is reporting it. You can still see the building right there over her shoulder, and then they lose the feed right before it actually does come down. Now, FEMA, when they did an initial investigation into World Trade Center 7, they said that their best hypothesis had a low probability of occurrence. So we have an unprecedented occurrence that has a low probability of happening, yet all these media outlets are able to predict this thing ahead of time. They're able to tell people to get back. They're able to say this building is going to come down. There's a problem here. Where is this determination coming from? There are people that'll say there was an engineer on the scene who was making this prediction. Well, according to NIST, this collapse initiated on the inside of the building and it was evacuated. How can an engineer standing on the street be making this determination regarding an event that's taking place on the inside of a burning building? And then who is this engineer? It seems like all of these mainstream media specials that like to debunk people like me or claim to would be interviewing this person, or at least NIST would have an interest in talking to this person. So it's very fishy, but it should not have happened, and it didn't happen that day. The evidence shows it was controlled demolition.
Fair enough. And to your point about just the media and them predicting, we can go through endless listings of these high trauma, high violence events where the media is, ready to rock, cameras rolling. You got the guy back at the front at the desk, at the news desk. He's all suited up with the makeup already ready to go. And it's like, what do you literally just sitting waiting for this, or did you know it was going to happen, or what's going on? And in the case of 9/11, some people were jumping the gun.
Well, the people on TV now again, I don't know how news is made, and I don't know every detail of what happens in the newsroom. I imagine that your people like Peter Jennings, he's been deceased for a number of years now, but like whoever your main guys are, I don't watch it anymore. They're probably on call for any kind of major world breaking news to be on the spot and bring it to you. But a lot of the people that you see on TV are relying off of what's coming off of the wire. So when I talk about Jane Stanley reporting it, does that mean Jane Stanley had some kind of insider knowledge? And she probably didn't even know what the Solomon Brothers building was. That was World Trade Center 7. She's just reading what they tell her to report out to people. But somebody had knowledge that this building would come down on that day. And those are the people that you need to be looking at and questioning about all this. How did you know? How did you know that this building was going to come down, especially since the building was evacuated and it was all relying on beams thermally expanding and pushing a girder off its seat on the inside? But these are the questions that our media doesn't ask. They ask good questions on the first day before they get the script, and then they learn to avoid it. And that's one of the obstacles that we face at 9/11 Truth.
Absolutely. Yeah. They ad lib until they get the script. Yep, for sure. And
exactly,
another, I don't know if you do you talk much about, I think it's building 6 that looks like it kind of just got scooped, the inside's kind of scooped out of it. Do you talk much about that?
We don't talk much about that. I know a guy who focuses on that, but we have not really gone into depth on.
Sure.
On
no worries.
6.
No problem. That's okay. I was just curious. Let's stick to building 7 and whatnot. It's just interesting that just goes into the theme that you're talking about, that there's this damage that's unaccounted for, essentially, right? Or not properly accounted for.
Well, there's damage on the corner of the building. And NIST was looking into that early. And there were a lot of people, debunkers, who just basically their whole job is just to argue with people like me on the internet. I don't engage in a lot of internet arguments, but we have our side and representatives who do that. And they were looking into that. But even NIST had to admit that damage, and you can see this, I mean, I get told not to refer people to the FAQs as much as the report, but the FAQs are pretty easy for looking up stuff and getting a quick answer. And even they admit that this did not play a significant role in initiating the collapse. They actually say that the collapse started on the opposite corner of where this damage was. So the damage is insignificant when talking about this issue of controlled demolition. They are relying on the raging fires. They are relying on thermal expansion. All right, these raging fires, as I said before, that were photographed as being out an hour before. And again, it's why their computer model can't replicate what happened in real life. That's why they have to stop it, because they cannot simulate what happened in real life without taking into account explosives being put inside the building. And again, we've got explosions being reported by first responders. I mean, we have William Rodriguez down in the basement of the building reporting an explosion. Now, he says right before the airplane hit, but what is going on there? We have Bobby McIlvaine. His father, Bob McIlvaine, has been an outspoken advocate for, probably as long as I can remember this issue existing, wanting a new investigation. His son was killed by an explosion as he was entering the North Tower lobby that morning. So there are serious questions. I mean, and that is an understatement. That's our polite way of saying it. But serious questions about this entire story that we've been given just about the towers, the 3 towers that fell in New York. And at the very least, it justifies a new investigation. And that's all we are asking for. I've even gotten debunkers to agree with me that there is no harm, considering that it is the most important event in recent history. There is no harm in looking into this again and rerunning the analysis. But our government refuses to. When I say that, I mean NIST. Our media refuses to dive any further into it other than attacking people like us for raising these questions. There's a serious problem going on out there, and that's why AE 9/11 Truth continues to exist. That's why the work that you're doing and so many other people and raising awareness is so important, because we have to be the voice of the media. We got to keep on beating the drum and be the telltale heart of this nation, the heart underneath the floorboards that are driving the murderers insane. And so that's why I continue to do this, and that's why I bring in 9/11 Freefall every week.
That's awesome, man. No, and again, props to you. You guys got my full support. So it's all about the education and unraveling it. What can you talk a little bit about, just to jump off topic real quick, can you talk a little bit about your podcast and how you schedule it and how you present it and whatnot?
Yeah, well, it started off, 2012 I started it. So I started doing volunteer work for AE 9/11 Truth in 2010. And then it's kind of funny how I thought of this idea of doing one. Is there used to be a video game that I would play called City of Heroes. And they had a podcast to promote it. And it was a husband and wife team. And I thought, this is nice for a game and everything, but AE could use something like this to talk about all the great projects that we're doing, bring on the great activists that we have involved with us. And I proposed it, and I said I would be happy to do all the editing and stuff. I don't want to host it. I don't want to host this. Somebody else can do it better. And we found some hosts. One person had to drop out quick. So I said, okay, I'll just be the sidekick. I just want to be the sidekick to this other guy. And I'll just produce it behind the scenes. And then he had some things come up and he couldn't do it anymore. So it was me. And I just took it and continued doing it. And now I like doing it. I just didn't think I was the right guy for the job at the time. But now, we've moved on into, it's gotten bigger. And we have a service that gets the podcast out to various different platforms. I was shocked to find it on Audible at one point. Audible's
I just
service.
saw it on Audible too. Yeah, that's cool, man.
I had no idea it was there. It was there. I was looking for other stuff on 9/11, and there's my show. We've moved recently to video now, hence the backdrop and all of this. And it's now on AE 9/11 Truth's YouTube channel. I'm going to be recording an episode tonight with this week's guest. And it's just something that we continue to do, keep on beating that drum and bringing this public record to everyone's attention, because that's what we're creating here. It documents the entire history of what 8E911 Truth has been up to, all the people associated with us, so that in the future they can't look back and say, nobody did anything, nobody tried. I know a lot of people who've been trying very hard for a very long time. And it's a way for us to bring the news to our supporters, which is probably the most important work of 9/11 Free Fall. So yes, I'm very proud of it, and I'm glad that I stuck on and shed my early hesitation at being the host.
Yeah, no,
because now I enjoy doing it.
Good for you. What kind of guests do you bring on? Do you bring on people from other like organizations and authors and filmmakers that study 9/11 and that kind of stuff, or?
Yeah, that's basically what we do. I mean, first and foremost, it's a show to promote what AE is doing at the moment. So if something comes up, for instance, we just put out a new film called The Unspeakable. You can go out and watch that right on YouTube, and you can buy it at our store as well on DVD. Dylan Avery, the guy who made Loose Change, he made that for us. It's a great film, it features the family members. But if we have that film come out, we got to let people know about it. We'll bring on people who were in the film to talk about their experience. If there's a development such as the lawsuits that we have going on right now, we have a lawsuit against NIST. I talked about that before.
Yeah, I was going to ask you.
A request for correction.
Yeah, can you talk a bit more about the lawsuit, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we submitted a request for correction to NIST. They dismissed it, and we're taking them to court now. That is the next step. And in the request for correction, you can go right to our website, ae911truth.org, and read it. Ted Walter, our Director of Strategy and Development, did a great job in just completely debunking NIST's entire analysis, talking about the stuff that they did not factor in, that they should have factored in, hence why it's a request for correction. And their refusal to do anything with it has nothing to do with Ted Walter's, it has nothing to do with any kind of failings on his part. It's actually a success that all they can do is stonewall, because what can they say? I mean, he lays it out perfectly in this entire thing. So I encourage people to read it. Even if you're not an engineer, these concepts are not that difficult to understand. It's intuitive. And we're still waiting. I mean, it's not like the movies where everything happens in 2 hours. Sometimes legal battles can go on a very long time, but every time that we have a new development, whether we're bringing that news to our supporters via 9/11 Free Fall, we started doing news updates, little 10-minute increments. We've also got a push for a new inquest into the death of Jeff Campbell. Jeff Campbell was a citizen of the United Kingdom. He died on September 11th. So now his brother Matt and the rest of his family is seeking a new inquest into his death based on the grounds that there's new evidence to show that the collapse of the buildings did not cause Jeff's death, that it was actually controlled demolition. And all you got to do is prove that a new inquest might bring up a new result on this. So we're very hopeful. It's got a lot of media attention over there in the UK, and we keep on following that. And that's something that we're just going to have to go along with the process on and see how it turns out. But I'm very hopeful, as I said, because there seems to be a lot of energy there behind it. So yeah, that's what 9/11 Free Fall talks about. And then we bring on authors too. I mean, we want to make sure it's credible 9/11 research, that it's not something that's getting out into, just speculation and, theorizing and things like that. But if I feel that people are credible, then we'll bring them on as well. And yeah, we've been going strong for now like 10 years, I think. Wow.
Good for you, man. Wow. That's awesome. 10 years. That's so sweet. I hope I'm still around 10 years from now doing something meaningful. That's so cool. And
yeah, you just got to keep trying.
Yeah, man. And now you just keep on pushing. Now you got a book coming out. Tell us about the book.
That's right.
I'm excited. I took a peek at it and it looks awesome. I like I said, I want to get my hands on a copy.
Yeah, I should have brought the copy, and I've got the only copy in existence at the moment. We had I don't know if anyone's been paying attention to the problems with the American shipping industry. We've got boxes stacked up at the port right now. I was
No.
just told this afternoon that they should be coming in next week, so that'll satisfy people. We originally went on pre-sale back August, I believe it was, and we're still waiting for the darn things to come in, but they are going to be coming in next week, I've been told. So that's good news, and certainly a load off on me. Basically, yeah, it's a graphic novel. I wrote the story, I did the art for it, and it's a story that is supposed that the intention was to put the 9/11 controlled demolition evidence into a wider story, a fictionalized form, sort of like the 9/11 truth movement's own JFK, except I don't have the resources to make a big budget film, but I can draw pictures. So that is what we did. A graphic novel is like a big comic book. The cover art was done by our marketing guy, Jeff Long. He did a great job with that. And it's a story of an 18-year-old kid. He was actually born on September 11th. So the story takes place back in 2019, just as his firefighter father was getting killed in the North Tower of the World Trade Center. So pretty much as this kid is coming into the world, his father is leaving it. And then around his 18th birthday on September 11th, he comes across the evidence of architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, and he very hesitantly starts speaking out about it, and it causes a chain reaction of events to sort of put him more and more into the public eye. So I don't want to give too much of it away. There's a lot of people waiting on this book right now, and once they read it, I hope they feel that it was worth the wait. So if your audience is watching this within a few days of us recording this interview, keep on checking back at the store. As soon as the books are in, we're going to be putting it up for sale again. And if this interview is a few months old by the time you catch up to it, then go to our store right now, ae911truth.org, and see if you want to check out a copy. We'll have them available.
Beautiful. No, that's perfect. I'm going to pump this out in the next day or so the timing works out perfect. So, and I'll put the links in the episode description. So yeah, everyone check out the book, man, because I'm gonna check it out. It looks great. The art looks wonderful, and it sounds great. So congrats. That looks great. Is that your first book, your first novel, graphic novel, first time doing a project like that?
It is. It started out as I was going to just do a little tiny comic book for AE. Something that we could use for marketing to young people. And I started writing the script for it because I always got to have a script to follow. And I started writing the script, and the story just got bigger and bigger. And I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be like a novel. And my boss, Kelly David, and our director of strategy, Ted Walter, just said, keep doing it, keep going. And then when I started the art, I was getting my feet wet with it as well, because I hadn't drawn pictures since college. And it took me a while to kind of get caught up again, but once I started doing it, I loved doing it, and it just kind of occupied my every night for a little while. And by the end, I think we had a really good product. So yeah, it's not after school special for 9/11 Truth. It's some adult stuff in it, and nothing too adult, but I mean, just some hardened characters in it.
Sure.
And we also have cameos by some well-known people in the 9/11 Truth movement, including Bob McIlvaine. Our CEO, Roland Angle, appears in it. Tony Zambodi, who was just on my show. So yeah, definitely an interesting thing for the movement to check out.
That's cool. Right on. Is there anything else you'd like to share about architects and engineers? Do you guys hold, I know with everything going on, it might be something like that might be on hold, but do you guys hold summits and big seminars and conferences and stuff like that?
Well, the problem was we had a lot of stuff planned, some really big stuff planned, and then COVID hit. Yeah. And unfortunately, this had a devastating impact on many things, not just with 9/11 events, but obviously we know all around the world, a lot of things got canceled. So unfortunately, we couldn't schedule anything around that time. We had to move to virtual events. And even now, I mean, there's still some places that still aren't open. So right now there is no events that I'm aware of that are planned, but we may be getting back to that very soon. But we have been doing a lot of virtual stuff. We've been doing a lot of outreach to professional organizations and things like that. And we've got a great team. It's called Project Due Diligence. This is led by our CEO, Roland Angle. He was doing this even before he became CEO. And what it is we have engineers who go to professional organizations, engineering organizations, and they give a presentation, usually about World Trade Center 7. They take questions, and they are actively doing this because it's not just about one person. I'm on here today talking overall about the organization, but we have many fine engineers who know this evidence inside and out, and they're prepared to talk to other engineers about it and take questions about it and wake other people up. And we find that once engineers, your rank and file engineers, will be interested enough to look into this. Now, the problem is that in some cases with certain organizations, once the political leadership finds out about it, they sometimes try to interfere. But generally, when you reach out to people with this evidence, they're curious enough to look at it. And usually when there's a presentation, by a show of hands, most people will end up agreeing for the need for a new investigation. Again, that's all that we are asking for. What harm is there, considering all the money that's been spent on other things, other nonsense things by our government? This is so important, and the families and the victims deserve it. So that is what we're doing, and that is most of our presentations right now. But keep an eye out, because another 9/11 anniversary is coming, and we'll probably do something around that time.
Beautiful. I see here, I'll pull it up real quick. Under the project Due Diligence, I see that there's also a petition that people can sign. Is that still open?
Oh yeah, that is our famous petition. We have had that pretty much since AE 9/11 Truth has been in existence, and it's got 3,500 architects and engineers have signed that petition, and then tens of thousands of others. I can't even keep track with the others number anymore, because so many people out there are concerned about this issue and put their name to that list, myself included. So if you have questions, and at the very least, go ahead and sign the petition at ae911truth.org. Let your name be counted. Beautiful. And I think it's sort of like the modern day Declaration of Independence. We're declaring independence from this lie here. So let your name go down in history as having been on the right side of history.
All right, cool. I'm going to sign my name up. Cool. So everyone, check it out. Sign your name, put your name to the petition, put your name to the sign of good. What other stuff can people do if they want to help you guys out, or if they want to join the cause? I know with what's going on with COVID, it might be a little slower, like you said, but in a regular year, give or take, so to speak, per se.
Right. I mean, if you want to help out, you certainly can help out. It's work. And, so you've got to actually do it and stuff. And even though we're doing stuff over the phone and virtually and all of that, I mean, that's the essence of this movement. Even our entire staff is scattered throughout the country. We're not all in one office here. Right. So you can do research for us, because if we want to find engineers, find a particular person, let's say, architects and stuff to do this outreach to, somebody's got to find where that person's number is so we can call them. You can do that. You can get on the phone and call them for us. I mean, anybody who actually wants to work, I can give you something to do that will be
all right.
Not only helpful, but also very important. And that's the key to success with anything. It's not, talent, is very little, because there's a lot of talented people who don't do anything. The main thing is just showing up and every day and doing that little bit each day to try to win this war for us, this information war. So you can do that, or if you're more of a lone wolf, you can do what you're doing, start a podcast, bring on people, keep an alternative media going, because you don't even want the alternative media to get a monopoly, because then it becomes the mainstream. You always got to have something out there challenging it. So you can do that. You can call your congressman. That's another thing. You can contact your congressman's office, say, I want to schedule a meeting with me and members of AE 9/11 Truth. We'll help you out in that process as well. But basically, we'll show up and do a telephone meeting with your member of Congress's office, talking about the controlled demolition evidence and the Bobby McIlvaine World Trade Center Investigation Act, which is draft legislation we wrote years ago that would do exactly what we're talking about. It would create a select committee to look into the evidence of controlled demolition on that day. So there's lots of things people can do. You just got to decide that you want to do it.
That's cool. That's great. I honestly, I love to hear that you guys have so many different facets, and you branch out, and you, like you said, it's all about actually doing the work and actually doing it. So that's great. I give you guys credit for that. It's especially in today's world, it helps to work on one thing, but to get things done, you got to kind of have your hands in different pots, and you got to juggle things, right? And you can't plug one hole because another hole will start leaking. You gotta keep moving, you gotta keep working, and you gotta, yeah, like you were talking about earlier, you gotta build the team. And anyone can be talented, but it's about getting the people that are gonna perform and do the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, the work itself is the most important thing. I mean, anybody can come on here and learn the evidence and talk about it. There's a role for that, but my heroes are the people who, stay up for extra 5 hours a night and give me, an extra 200 phone numbers and addresses the next day. Because if it weren't for them, I mean, somebody'd have to do it. We'd be slowed down in our other work. Yeah. So, I was watching today on somebody posted a Facebook video of workers making like cast iron pots, right? Okay. And I said, God bless those people who do that work, because all the stuff that we take for granted here, if they weren't actually sitting there doing that work, we wouldn't have those pots and pans to cook with and all of this stuff. It's the same thing with activism. And you don't have to feel like the whole weight of the world is on your shoulders alone. There's a lot of people working at this. So if everybody just, you pick the job that you want to do. If you're somebody that just does art murals about 9/11 truth, that's what you do. That's all you want to do. So you don't have to have your hands in every single thing if you don't want to. Just do what you think you can do best and do it well and keep doing it. And trust that there's other people working for the same goals that you are, and don't have that burden on yourself. Free yourself, and when your mind is more free, then you can get better work done as well. So that's my best advice.
Totally agree, man. Totally agree. Well, is there anything else you'd like to share? Is there anything else you'd like to talk about?
Essentially, I mean, we just released the film, The Unspeakable, and okay. It focuses more on the families, as I said before. You can watch that right on YouTube, or you can buy the DVD at our store. You can also check out our other films, 9/11 Explosive Evidence, Experts Speak Out, where they go into more depth on the evidence that we've been talking about today. So check those out. And if you want to watch 9/11 Freefall, just go to 911freefall.com. We're on pretty much every single week. We're even recording one tonight. So check it out.
Right on, man. Yeah. So I'll include all those links and everything. There's a lot of good stuff to go through there, Andy, including your podcast, your book. I'm very excited to check out the book. And just from going through the website of Architects and Engineers, there's a lot of good stuff there for people to go through, whether they want to get involved or not, if they just want to learn more. So again, I give my props to you and your team. I'm very happy and appreciative for your time. Thanks for coming on and sharing what you guys do. I really hope that we can get together again for an interview, a project, a talk, something like that. I'm definitely going to check out the website and one day lend a hand and drop you a line and just see, hey, do you need someone to get some phone numbers? Do you need someone to make some calls? Because, I love doing that kind of stuff. I love helping the cause. I mean, it's nice to be the person to type the final report and have your name on the report. But I like to be the guy who, does the background work and gathers the facts and figures and figures out what's really going on and be the guy on the street, right? So that's great that you guys have such a strong and dedicated group and growing number of people and professionals that are willing and open to do that kind of thing.
Absolutely. I mean, look, this is a collective effort. We've been going at it as the 9/11 Truth Movement even long before I was on the scene, and I came on the scene in 2008. I mean, that was a long time ago, but there were people out there beating the drum on this from day one of the event happening. And it's just been, it's sort of like these soldiers who do their tour in these wars. They go for a tour for a while, then they come out, then they come back, and and the new ones come in, and you got to think of it that way. So if we all just do a little bit, actually, I heard that in World War II propaganda, some old radio show. They said, small things done well every day are going to win this war for us. So I'm going to take that, reverse engineer it, and use it for our information war. If you do small things every day, do it well, then eventually we're going to push this thing right over the cliff.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's all, exactly. We got to take little steps, do the work, educate the people, and once we, I truly think once we educate enough people and things become more clear, in the sense that people won't be so quick to jump to the whole conspiracy theory, crazy, nut job talk, and say, no, there's something real to discuss here. And on that point, there's also the group of people that will say, oh, that's offensive, you can't talk about that, people died, and where's your respect? And it's like, yeah, well, people died, and it's something that warrants a conversation. It warrants a second look, a proper look. And it's not like we're talking about this stuff for fun. It's about, we want the truth, and we want the truth for society and the people, as well as the people, that the families for the people that passed away, right? And that's something that the new movie focuses on. And that's again, like I keep saying it, but that's great, the stuff that you guys do. It's great that you don't focus on one area, you cover it all. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, that's right. And you know what I say to that is, first of all, 9/11 family members started the 9/11 truth movement, in my opinion, with the
There you
Jersey Girls. And we have 9/11 family members who are asking the same questions, standing with us, calling for this new investigation. Their questions weren't answered. They weren't satisfied with the story they were given. And as well, you look at this, you see the people that say, oh, people died that day. Well, whenever there's a murder investigation, you ask questions, you look at the evidence, you don't just accept what you're told, because if something happens, if it's physically impossible, it's physically impossible. Now, we don't get into the blame game, we don't get into pointing fingers at any particular party. I know there's other groups that do that, and you can look at their work and determine the validity of it, but we tell you what happened or what couldn't have happened that day, what it had to have been, and what the evidence shows. That's all that we do. And in murder investigations, somebody gets killed, one of the first things the police do is they look at the spouse. Are they being disrespectful to the family member there, or are they just doing police work, right? Ruling out the spouse as the murderer there. So sometimes when you're pursuing justice, you just got to be analytical and go wherever the evidence leads. And that's exactly what we do.
That's great that you don't, you kind of, you bring people up onto the fence, and you don't try to push them off, so to speak. So you're not, like you said, you don't play the blame game. You essentially want to say, hey, there's something not right here, and I think we should talk about it. And I respect that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, yeah. And the thing is, for me, the answer is settled. I mean, it was controlled demolition on that day. There is no other explanation. The explanation that we've been given, I mean, even the other side can't even get its story straight. We have the official story from NIST, but we have other engineers and groups that are putting out, even in some cases, contradictory evidence, trying to argue this progressive collapse scenario. Yeah. They have slightly different ones, but they don't even have a real lock on what the official story is. But our evidence stays the same, our story stays the same, because that is what happened that day. And I'm sure if we had a real investigation by the proper authorities in this government, and it was honest, that is exactly what it would show. So there you go.
Fair enough, my friend. Well, I think this was great. Thank you so much, Andy. Andy Steele, ladies and gentlemen, architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth. He's also got the 9/11 Free Fall podcast, and Born on 9/11, that new book is coming out. That should be dropping any day now, you said, Andy?
We're getting the shipment next week, and then they'll be going out to the people in the pre-sale, but they'll be available for sale. We'll be letting our supporters know. So if you're not signed up for our emails at email@truth.org, get signed up. You'll be hearing a lot from us.
Great. I'll include all the links and info that we talked about today in the episode description. So guys, make sure to check that out. There's a lot of good stuff there. And enjoy the rest of your evening. I know you're doing an episode tonight of Free Fall. Have a good episode. And I hope we can stay in touch and send my best to your team. Just a general pat on the back.
All right. Thank you, Jordan. Good luck.
All right. You too, my friend. All the best.
Bye.